Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at another awful scenario with you. A wolf in sheep's clothes. According to the Roman poet Decimus Junius Juvenal, there is almost no litigation in which the source of the disagreement is not a lady. Times change, but values remain constant, and while not everyone agrees, much of it is due to the feminine gender. The lady is often at the center of every tangled plot. Another heinous incident erupted in Oklahoma City in the fall of 2001. The city is situated in the midst of a highly religious region. The so-called Bible Belt of the United States is noted for its religious and conservative values. At the same time, this region of America is notorious for high rates of crime, divorce, and teen pregnancy. The cold-blooded act committed by Andrew's family, which saddened and outraged the church community, was added to the awful list. No breaks. One rainy October morning, an odd phone call sounded in the office of Robert Andrew, senior vice president of a well-known advertising firm. The individual on the other end of the phone identified himself as a doctor from a local hospital. The unnamed man stated that Mr. Andrew's wife, Brenda, was in severe condition. In a hurry, Rob dashed to his car, started the engine, and drove to the clinic. On the way, he noticed that when he touched the brake pedal, the car did not stop. After running a red light, he managed to pull over to the side of the road. The automobile came to a stop. He somehow survived and called a taxi. When he arrived at the hospital, he realized that his wife was not a patient. When Rob took his car to a repair shop, the technician informed him that the brake hoses had been severed. The unfortunate man was mute from amazement. Someone had clearly intended to kill him and had devised a plausible excuse for driving the car. But who was capable of such a thing? Rob went to the police station after gathering all of the necessary information. He told law authorities that someone had tried to kill him, and he seemed to know who it was. The duo is inseparable. Robert and Brenda were married for almost 17 years. The couple had 2 lovely children during their marriage. The couple was deeply religious. Therefore, they reared their children with faith and values. They went to church together and did charitable work. To the average person, their union appeared joyful and reliable. Their family ship sank in October of 2001. Mrs. Andrew left her husband and filed for divorce. Brenda is a good girl. Brenda Evers was born December 16, 1963, in Enid, Oklahoma. The girl's parents were devoted Christians. They ate meals together, prayed as a group, and went to church. Brenda grew raised as a quiet, peaceful child. She did well at school. She spent the most of her time at church serving others. When many of her peers began dating men, she waited for the one and only for life. In high school, the girl cheered for the soccer squad. She enjoyed dancing but seldom attended parties. Brenda was a paragon of piety and modesty throughout her youth, much like her mother. By the way, she wanted to be just like her mother in everything. As a result, after marriage, she planned to become a housewife and devote herself to her husband and children. Love comes first. At the age of 17, the girl met her friend's elder brother, Rob Andrew. He was older and attended one of the public institutions. Young folks began communicating. Despite the fact that the guy was a Baptist and Brenda was a Lutheran, they discovered that they shared many similarities. They shared conservative beliefs, went to church, and aspired to have a large and friendly family. So the cordial friendship developed into a loved one. After a while, the girl attended college in Winfield, Kansas. Despite the 125-mile barrier between them, the pair actively communicated. Brenda eventually relocated to Stillwater University in Ohio a year later to be closer to her lover. Overs underwent a metamorphosis and became husband and wife around the summer of 1984. Soon, Robert obtained an enticing employment offer in Houston, Texas. The man questioned the decision, but Brenda persuaded her spouse. While he was pursuing a career as an advertising manager, she earned a degree and landed a job in finance. Mrs. Andrew fell in love with the city's huge buildings, nightclubs, and fast lifestyle. Texas transformed the young woman. She let go of her excessive modesty. She began to care for herself, wearing beautiful clothes and makeup, and forming a big group of acquaintances. Her spouse was not impressed with his wife's makeover. He thought a believing lady should be more reserved. Besides, Rob was homesick. As a result, when he was asked to return to the advertising business in Oklahoma City, he enthusiastically accepted. Brenda, on the other hand, was not supportive of her spouse. They even disagreed on this point. Then they came to an agreement. The pair agreed that Robert would settle in a new location and find a suitable home, and if everything goes well, the wife will join him. For a few months, they lived separately. The family was finally reunited. In the early 1990s, the Andrews moved into a magnificent home in Landsbrook, a famous area. 9 months later, they welcomed their daughter, Tricity. Brenda even resigned her career to be a housewife and raise children. Parker was born 4 years later. It seems that there was a family idol. They had everything: love, children, a home, and financial success. What happened in Mrs. Andrews' garage? On November 20, 2001, a few days before Thanksgiving, Rob intended to visit Brenda's house. He had made prior arrangements with her to take the children with him during the holidays. At the time, the couple had divorced. In the evening, his ex-wife met him at the house's entrance. She instructed the man to go to the garage and assist with the malfunctioning equipment. When he crouched down, he could hear footsteps behind him. Robert glanced towards the noise. A gunshot rang out, and the wounded guy collapsed on the concrete floor. Around 6 p.m., emergency services received a call. Brenda Andrew was the person who made the call. She stated that she was injured and her husband had died. An ambulance was dispatched immediately, and when paramedics arrived, they saw a horrible scene. A man lay dead in the garage, in a pool of blood from a gunshot wound. His wife was lucky, as she was shot in the arm. Brenda's clothes were splattered with blood, and the woman appeared strangely disconnected. The paramedic diagnosed her condition as shock. "I tried to give Rob first aid, but I believe he died," she claimed. The victim's hand was wrapped, and she was later sent to the hospital. As the ambulance left the area, cops began their investigation. The first thing they discovered was a .22 caliber bullet lodged in the wall. A shotgun shell casing was discovered shortly afterward, indicating that many weapons were used in the attack. The second item the officer spotted was the victim's wallet. He still had it on him. Thus, the shooting was unrelated to a robbery. To understand what transpired, Mr. Andrews' ex-wife had to be interviewed. Brenda explained why they had met at the clinic. She further stated that while they were busy, 2 masked armed men entered the garage. The goons shouted something in their way, but she couldn't hear what they said. One of them then shot Rob twice, while the other wounded her as she attempted to flee. After then, the attackers retreated quickly. She didn't know who the attackers were or what they came for. However, the victim stated that Robert could scarcely have enemies because he was a great and kind person who was always willing to help others. The woman stated that she was terrified by what had transpired, especially since there were children in the house at the time of the incident. However, many of her statements were conflicting. The cops knew Brenda was lying, especially since the children had not been packed for the trip. Interviews with neighbors produced no beneficial findings. Neither of them had noticed anything unusual that fateful evening. To learn more about Brenda and Robert's personal lives, the detectives started to question their acquaintances. Midlife crisis. It turns out that the couple's relationship deteriorated with the birth of their second child. Mr. Andrew often told friends and pastors that Brenda was abusive to him and that she despised their marriage. Ronnie Stump, a friend of Robert's and frequent visitor to the devastated family, said he thought their reactions were unusual. Brenda was not hesitant about her expressions, even in the sight of strangers, and Rob clearly loved the lady more than she deserved, since he tolerated her pranks for a long time. Friends of the family uniformly stated that she had experienced an unusual transformation. She transformed from an ordinary housewife to a woman of easygoing behavior. These claims were not baseless. There was plenty of evidence to back them up. Brenda was plainly experiencing a midlife crisis. Her style of clothes had evolved. The once elegant woman began to dress vulgarly and in flashy colors. But it did not end there. Mrs. Andrew became quite private with her spouse. She didn't tell him where she went, who she spent time with, or what she was up to. Robert soon discovered his wife's extramarital activities. In October 1997, she began dating Rick Nunley, the husband of a friend. Brenda had worked with the man at an Oklahoma bank. The couple dated for a year and then maintained an occasional phone interaction. Later, another lover was James Higgins, the owner of a local grocery. At first, he was merely impressed by the candid clothing and flirting, and then he received the hotel keys from Brenda. The man pursued the skilled seductress and met with her once or twice a week. This affair lasted almost 5 years. Rob remained completely ignorant at this time. However, he recognized that their marriage was fraying at the seams. Furthermore, his wife ceased to communicate with him and spend time with him. He hoped that things will improve eventually and worked hard to keep the family together. Brenda ended her relationship with Higgins in 2001, but it was not for the sake of her husband or the sacred vows of marriage. She was slipping farther into the pit of drunkenness and vice. Fatal love 2 years ago. A Baptist church had popped up in Oklahoma City, thanks entirely to Mr. Andrews' donations. In it, the guy was ordained as a deacon, and his wife was appointed Sunday school teacher. From the outside, their family appeared fortunate, upholding morals and traditions. Brenda hadn't totally lost her image as a model wife by then. She willingly taught the kids the fundamentals of religion and fellowship. There she met James Pavitt, her new lover. He was likewise a part-time school teacher, married and typically pious, and a friend of Rob's. However, he was unable to resist Brenda's charms and brilliant grin. They first met in the spring of 2001. They did it covertly at first, but as they lost their sense of propriety, they stopped hiding their emotions. Everyone in the congregation expressed their sympathies for one another. Rob accused his wife of adultery and had a heated argument with her. They separated. By this point, James had divorced his wife. Rob still hoped to reunite the family, but Brenda remained resolute and even filed for divorce. Following this event, there was an unusual call to Mr. Andrews' office, followed by an unexpected car malfunction. Rob suspected the sweet pair while attempting to take his life, which he reported to the police. What could have prompted such sentiments in an open and ingenious man? Law enforcement officials asked the same question. Rob did not stop the divorce. The agreement regarding children was achieved. He assisted Brenda financially. What else was there to do but gratify a cheating husband? It was all about money. In addition to teaching school, James Pavitt worked as an insurance agent. In the summer of that year, he obtained a $800,000 insurance coverage on Mr. Andrew. Brenda was the single recipient. It's about insurance. When detectives began investigating the odd attack on Mr. Andrews' family, they learned about the couple's relationship as well as the incident involving the car's brakes. The detectives compared the facts. Brenda's role in the murder of her husband became evident. In addition, there was a new suspect in the case, her new lover. Then detectives discovered that 2 weeks before the garage incident, Rob Andrew had visited the insurance firm. He wished to eliminate his unfaithful wife from his insurance coverage. However, James declined, stating that the contract's provisions could only be modified by the beneficiary, Brenda Andrew. Rob chose to double-check the information with management rather than trusting his former acquaintance. Brenda and James tried to fabricate the insurance policy by transferring ownership to Mrs. Andrew. Rob's signature was faked, and it was dated retroactively. Mr. Andrew was informed by Pavitt's superiors that he still held the policy and that only the policyholder could amend the terms of the agreement. When James learned about the incident, he was furious, as the facts revealed were the basis for his dismissal. Investigation. Officers also discovered that Robert was in possession of a 16-gauge shotgun. Brenda did not give Rob the weapon when he moved out of the house. During an investigation of Andrew's home, the shotgun was mysteriously missing. Meanwhile, a check of Gigstad's neighbor's home revealed an unexpected conclusion. A discharged round casing from the shotgun they were seeking for was discovered on the bedroom floor, as well as several .22 caliber bullets in the Gigstad family home's attic. The Gigstad couple was not at home when the incident occurred. No traces of forced entry were discovered. Mrs. Gigstad confessed that Brenda Andrew had the backup key to their home. Another piece of evidence came from Pavitt's daughter, Joanna Larson. On the day of the incident, the daughter lent her father her vehicle. He promised to have it repaired. However, when James returned the vehicle, the daughter discovered that he had not repaired it. In addition, Joanna discovered an unusual item on the vehicle mat, a .22 caliber bullet. To top it all off, the child claimed that her father urged her to throw it away after she told him about it. Investigators also determined that James bought a firearm a week before the attack. As a result, investigators prepared to question the loving pair. The last ride, Robert Andrews' funeral, took place on November 23rd. This crime prompted numerous questions among family and friends. Even more bewilderment developed when Brenda and her children did not attend the ceremony. In addition, James Pavitt did not turn there to say farewell to his pal. No one there knew where they were. This concerned not just Robert's relatives, but also police. It became clear that the no-shows had fled. They apparently assumed that the officers were on the trail of the criminals. The suspects have been identified. By then, the autopsy results had been returned. Brenda's account of the attack differed greatly from the forensic findings. As the authorities suspected, the attack was carried out with two separate weapons. Robert and Brenda were injured differently than the dead man's wife claimed. The first shot at the man was fired at long range with a shotgun, but the second was fired at close range with a .22 caliber handgun. Brenda's arm was likewise shot at close range with the same gun. Analyzing the bloodstains detected and their location on the fabric revealed that the spouse was present when the husband was shot. The angle of the blood corresponds to where the gunman was. That is, Brenda fired the second shot at the wounded Robert. Brenda and James were officially identified as suspects and declared sought following the examination results. On the run, unfortunately, the fugitives were several days ahead of police. Authorities notified border officials that the suspects may have crossed the border. However, they were nowhere to be found. After a while, it became obvious that James and Brenda had fled the nation. Police suspected that they were in Mexico. To catch the criminals, the decision was made to block their accounts. Without a source of income, they would eventually make their presence known, and they did. 3 months later, Pavitt contacted his daughter. He urged her to send the money. The man overlooked one thing. The girl cooperated with the investigation. Joanna had no doubt that her father was involved in the crime. He was obviously hiding something from her. Even when he encouraged her boyfriend to call Mr. Andrew, posing as a doctor at the local hospital, and report his wife's condition. Thanks to James' call, the inquiry discovered that the criminals were hiding in Cancun. In February 2002, James Pavitt and Brenda Andrew were detained at the border and turned over to us authorities. The two have been charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to conduct a felony. Meanwhile, the Andrews children were placed with their paternal grandparents. Following their detention, none of the accused agreed to participate with the inquiry. They did not plead guilty and spoke in front of lawyers. Charles James was the first to take the stand in court. The prosecution painstakingly constructed a case. Pavitt was reportedly a former Army sniper who was skilled with guns. His scandalous affair and efforts to prevent Rob Andrew from depriving Brenda of her beneficiary status were also discussed. His daughter's testimony and the physical evidence discovered were taken into consideration. The jury convicted James Pavitt and sentenced him to death. Brenda Andrew was the next to go on trial. Brenda's trial was filled with sordid details, discoveries, and intrigue, whereas James' trial was methodical, gradually revealing a clear picture of motives, means, and execution. The prosecution highlighted Brenda's personality and her record of infidelities. Her ex-lovers were invited to the hearing. They portrayed the woman as lacking faith and honesty. When the prosecutor questioned Brenda why she killed her husband, she said, "God knows that in my heart I am pure and innocent. Set me free, people of faith." The prosecutor disagreed. He portrayed her as a lecherous woman who didn't love her husband, cheated on him, and ultimately murdered him for selfish reasons. To establish his claim, he displayed the contents of a luggage she had brought with her to Mexico. It included beautiful lingerie as well as the book 203 Ways to Drive a Man Crazy in Bed. Would a grieving widow flee her husband's funeral? The prosecution questioned the defendant. In response, the defense team attempted to depict Brenda as a victim of what occurred. The defense attorney mentioned that she was also harmed in the attack. However, forensic specialists stated that the woman shot herself in the arm, and the defense claimed that it had a letter containing Pavette's sole confession to the murders committed. That would appear to be a valid argument. However, handwriting analysis revealed that the paper was fabricated by Brenda Andrew herself. However, the most stunning discovery came from another. Pavette's counsel claimed that Brenda would become the beneficiary of his insurance policy if his ward died. In time, it appears that the same destiny awaited him as Rob, or Brenda believed that she would be able to prove her innocence and that the consequences for the crime would fall on her boyfriend. After the latter's death sentence, she would also be entitled to the insurance money. The jury deliberated for around 6 hours. Brenda Andrew was eventually found guilty of the crime and sentenced to death. Bottom line, both prisoners are on death row awaiting execution. Brenda challenges the ruling several times but is unsuccessful. Pavette's execution is planned for July 2024. It may be rescheduled again, as it has been done 4 times already. Brenda's execution date has not yet been determined. She is the only woman sentenced to death in Oklahoma. Brenda and James' malicious aim is inherently awful. However, the fact that these individuals believe themselves God-fearing and taught morality to youngsters complicates the problem. People who preach things that do not apply to their personal life are unethical and merciless. You can anticipate anything from them because they are unaware of moral principles. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel. There are many stunning stories ahead.